Really good segue. So I want to take the top 4 teams in the country, the big 4. This is, in my opinion, tier 1. You can shuffle the order around, but I think there's a clear drop off after these 4 teams. Duke, Kansas, Purdue, Michigan State. In theory, all of these teams should be Final Four contenders, national title contenders, teams that should have a chance to win their conference. Purdue and Michigan State got to play each other, but they're going to be there all season long. I want to imagine a world for each of these teams where they don't, where something goes wrong, where disaster strikes. And I want us to diagnose what happens here. We are 1 year removed from North Carolina, going from the preseason number 1 team in the country to train wreck season, miss the tournament. That's what I want to play with these 4 teams. Let's imagine a world where Duke, Kansas, Purdue, and Michigan State, one by one, have a train wreck season and miss the tournament, fall all the way from the top 4 to an unranked team that's in the NIT or declining an NIT invite in North Carolina's case. So let's start at the top, and then we'll work our way down. The Almanac's preseason number 1 team was the Duke Blue Devils. Let's start there. If Duke was to have a disaster season, how did it happen?
Can I make a prerequisite for this exercise as well?
Yep.
So I think that obviously the obvious answer would be injuries for all these teams. Let's leave the injury reason out.
I like that.
Okay, so let's just talk purely basketball standpoint.
Yep.
For me, I think the thing that could be the downfall for Duke will be the guard play, I think. And it's not necessarily the play of Tyrese Proctor, but I think that people are overlooking the fact that this team still has Jeremy Roach. And Jeremy Roach has been there for a very long time and has had the ball in his hand a whole lot. And they also have other talented guards coming in like Jared McCain, who I think should have a pretty high usage and be able to be a pretty good player in his own right. And everyone's expecting Tyrese Proctor to also make some, really good All-American leap coming into this season. And yes, they're not the same player, but there are worlds where you get extremely hyped about a freshman who had a really good maybe end of the season, a la Andre Curbelo, and they fall flat coming into their sophomore year. Now, Tyrese Proctor, I think, is a completely different player than Andre Curbelo, and I don't think he's going to, fall to the flatness of ended up at Southern Miss. But what I will say is that I think the guard play and maybe like how the mouths of the guards are fed on this basketball team can affect things. Because I think you're going to get what you get from Flip. I think that Mark Mitchell is also going to have a really good sophomore season. But I'm interested to see how the guard dynamic works, because in most people's eyes, isn't it Tyrese Proctor having the ball in his hands at all times?
I don't know. I don't know if people expect that or not. I guess because he's the higher ranked guy in all these lists. So you would think, but this kind of goes hand in hand with where I'm at on this team. And again, preface all of this by these aren't predictions. These aren't us predicting this is going to happen. This is a fun hypothetical game that Sleepers likes to play of, if it does happen, how did it happen? So if Duke were to actually fall this far, miss the tournament, have a disaster season, the only thing I can think of that would cause that is John Shire's in over his head. I think Shire's a really good coach. I think a long term, I don't have any questions about where Duke is headed with Shire at the helm. I do have questions of, is he ready to handle so much talent and so many different personalities quickly? And I don't know these Duke guys personally in and out, but I know that on paper, this team has 11 different guys that should warrant huge roles on any given college basketball team. And I would imagine at a certain point, guys are going to be frustrated, whether it's these incoming freshmen who think they're NBA players 12 months from now, or whether it's the guys who returned, whether it's Jeremy Roach, who is why does Tyrese Proctor have the ball all the time? Or if it's Tyrese, who has people in his ear telling him he's a top 5 player in the country, but it's Jeremy Roach's team. There's a lot of guys who just deserve first option love on this team. And only one of them's going to get it. And I don't know who it's going to be. I think last year there were more obvious personality clash concerns with North Carolina, but I think there's more potential for guys getting upset with their role on this Duke team. And it's a really tall task. Give Shire credit for landing the recruiting classes he has. It's going to be a crazy test of his coaching abilities to manage all of that and keep everybody happy in this season. So that's how I would see it. Don't think it's very likely, but I do think there's a world where everybody's just like upset with each other and the Duke locker room kind of crumbles. Let's go to number 2 on this list, which is the Kansas Jayhawks. I have a pretty obvious answer here. How would Kansas's season collapse if it collapses?
You know, for as high as I am on Kansas, and once again, everyone, this is a hypothetical. So this is a worst case scenario type situation. I think I'll put at the top of my list is DeJuan Harris not being aggressive. And I think he did it for large portions of last season. And Kansas had a real tough stretch there. Now, obviously, you assume that DeJuan Harris, being the older guy, being the leader of this team, the point guard, he realizes that he can't do that. I think one of the best parts of DeJuan Harris is that though he does do a good job of though he does need to be more aggressive, I think he did a good job of taking a step back and realizing sometimes the players he has around him and what the team needs for him to do to win and what he needs to do to make all the players around him better. I think that this Kansas team, in order to be the best team they can be, though, this season, he has to realize that he needs to be aggressive. And that doesn't always mean scoring, but DeJuan Harris needs to play whatever minutes he plays, let's say 30 minutes a game. Those 30 minutes have to be aggressive basketball, looking to score, looking to make plays, looking to pass, doing all that. And then 1B, or the second thing I'll put on that list, is that we know how up transfers go, and they don't always work out. And it's looking like Kansas is already not going to have Arterio Morris this season because of off the court issues. So a lot is riding on a freshman in Marco Jackson, who I think is very talented, but can he be consistently a good knockdown shooter? I don't really know that. And then you have an up transfer, Nick Timberlake. He was a prolific shooter at Townsend, but that we know all too well that up transfers don't always click early on or even in the first year at all. So a lot rides on Nick Timberlake and being able to knock down shots for this team, and that's not a guarantee.
Yeah, I agree. So I think of these 4, I think there are more ways that Kansas's season falls apart than there are for the other 3. Like, I kind of had to stretch my mind mentally on what's going to happen with Duke. I think Michigan State and Purdue have answers that are actual things that could happen. But I think Kansas has multiple. Kansas has like 6 different things I could see happening. Starting with your point, DeJuan Harris might not be ready to take a jump. If DeJuan Harris is the same guy he is last year, I think this Kansas team struggles. Like, he needs to be a guy that's willing to score. And he can't pick 1 out of every 3 games to do that. Like, he had 25 games in one of their games, or 25 points in one of their games overseas, and then 2 games where he was like 1 for 4. That just can't happen. Like, he, in my opinion, this team needs him to be a 10 to 12 points a game every single night guy. I think he's good enough to do it. I don't know what's there mentally with how he's wired to play the game that keeps him from doing that more. 2, I think all their wings could just be bad. I'll just call it what it is, for lack of a better word. Like, obviously you're not bad if you have a scholarship offer to Kansas, but compared to Kansas starters at the 2 through 4, I think this team could be a lot weaker than we are used to seeing, and at least that we've definitely seen since like Ochai to Jalen Wilson. I don't know that I trust Timberlake at all. I think Marco Jackson would be top of my list for guys to play in the middle of DeJuan and Hunter, but he's a true freshman. We don't know for sure. KJ Adams, I have questions about the fit with Hunter. Again, Arterio Morris has very serious legal troubles right now. Speaking of that, another thing that could derail a season. If Arterio Morris is actually convicted of what's going on here, how does that locker room move on from that? Is Bill Self capable of getting through a full season and being on the sidelines every single game? Is Hunter Dickinson actually capable of being a first option on a good team? Like, to me, all 5 of those categories are unknown. And if 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 3 actually come to fruition, this Kansas team falls out of like top 2 in the country to like, maybe they're like 15 to 20 range. If God forbid all 5 of them happen at once, then we're talking disaster. And I don't think like that's never happened. You can go through Bill Self's entire career. He's never had a disaster season. So I highly suspect it won't happen, but there's like a 1% chance it does. And I think I'll be excited. The first month of the season, I'm going to have like a very strong eye on Kansas because there's a lot. There's a lot, in my opinion, that could go wrong and derail a season. To Purdue, who's third in the Almanac's list, if things go wrong for Purdue, again, we're saying a North Carolina style missed the tournament. What happened?
I'm not trolling when I say this. I don't think there is a world where anything happens where they miss the tournament.
Okay.
I truly don't.
Okay.
Like they lose Edie, they're making the tournament. There's probably still a top 25 team.
Yeah, I mean the obvious one would be something happens with Edie. We said we're not doing injuries for this exercise, so we can't just
So
say
I
he's out.
mean,
Nothing. Yeah. I mean
I
the only thing for me at all would be huge sophomore slumps for Smith and Lawyer.
yeah, that's right.
Um
But if they have huge, they have huge slumps, that's all right.
they
We
still
throw it
have
in.
Zach Edey. Yeah, you throw it to Edey. Okay. I'll add one I think could actually happen. Sophomore slumps from the guards mixed with Matt Painter gets too cute. And I am a Painter guy. I like Painter. I know he has a lot of things he needs to prove. Here's my Matt Painter gets too cute thing that I actually think will happen. He's been playing Morton way more minutes than he deserves. We know that. He's been playing Mason Gillis a ton. I don't know what that looks like. This is the first Purdue team I think that they've had in like maybe Painter's entire career, going back to the Hummel days, where it's like, I think they got 11 guys who should play. They're deep this year. They were top heavy, in my opinion, a little bit last year. This year, like you add Colvin, you add Hyde, you add the transfer guard they got. Like they have dudes this year that a lot of guys should play. You can't dink around with Morton the way you have been when you have Colvin and Hyde behind him. Beyond that, Painter has been doing this whole press tour about like point the finger at himself, look in the mirror, which I love. I buy, I believe it. Like he's holding himself accountable. At the same time, I think there's a chance, Cart, where Painter coaches this whole season with the intention of just saving everything for March. And if that happens, like, what if he says he's going to keep Edey on a minutes restriction this year? It might happen. Like, what if he's going to force Caleb First onto the floor and Willie Berg so that he doesn't transfer? Like, I think he could get too cute. I think he could play the wrong puzzle pieces at the wrong times. And if that happens mixed with Smith and Lawyer just aren't better than they were at the end of last season, then okay, maybe this team goes from top 5 to like non-top 25. But I still think they make the tournament.
Yeah, I kind of like that angle, or like trying to do something they're not to prove to other people like this
Yeah.
isn't the same and it ruins things.
Yeah. What makes Purdue Purdue is that they are Purdue. Like,
Right. Like
don't go away from
you
that.
know how we talk about how like players come back to school and try to show like NBA people what they are and it ends up being detrimental to the team. That
Yep.
could kind of be like a Matt Painter situation. He tries to show that he's something that they're not, and you don't just go with the Purdue bread and butter and chalk it up to some freak tournament stuff of why you lost last year.
Yeah. I think it would be a big mistake if Purdue tries to make changes to what Purdue basketball is because of some fluky March losses.
I'm just like thinking about like an offense where like they run everything with Zach Edey just like at the elbow.
Yeah, high low and he's the high, or like
Yeah,
they got Edey and pick and pops. He's trying to show off his 3-point shooting. Like crazy.
I need an Edey 3-pointer this season.
Yeah, I bet he hits one. I would take the over. If it's over 0.5 Zach Edey threes this year, I would take the over. Do I get plus money for that?
Yes.
Okay. Final one, and I promise I'm gonna be positive for this segment, just as a personal favor to you, a personal apology for how harsh I've been lately. Michigan State, if there was a disaster season this year and they fall from the top 4 to missing the tournament for the first time in this long run that Izzo's had, what happens? How would it happen?
I think two things come to mind. I think that one, it'd have to be obviously you pointed to the point, AJ Hogard. It'd have to be Hogard. I think if Hogard, there's still a step for Hogard to take this season. Now I know that he was really good down the stretch last season, but I think people need to realize that there's still another step kind of in his game and just maturity and leadership wise. I think he can take that can raise the ceiling of this team. And as you know all too well, last season, I feel like when Michigan State did falter, some of that had to do with AJ's body language, leadership, and how he kind of ran the team. Obviously, Michigan State will have a backup plan for that this year. If that does happen, they can have the likes of putting Jeremy Fears in here into the game. So I'll go to lean on my second reason. It's that Xavier Booker is not good whatsoever. Like if he's not good whatsoever, that's going to be absolutely detrimental to this team because I think we need him to step up in the front court. And I think he has the most talent of any front court player. And that talent needs to show. And I don't know if it'd be like missed the tournament type bad for Michigan State because we'll have the guard play to pick up that. But it's extremely important that Xavier Booker establishes himself as the most talented front court player on this team because he is.
I agree with that strongly. I think my Michigan State scenario would start with the Big Ten is actually better than people think. Because I think even if the Big Ten is actually good this year and there's like 7-8 really good teams, I think Purdue still runs through it. I don't think that's the case with Michigan State. Like I think everybody expects Michigan State to be like head and shoulders above teams 3 through 6. But like I think there is a world where Maryland and Ohio State and Illinois are like kind of right there with Michigan State. And if all of a sudden that goes from Michigan State's looking at their schedule thinking they should win 16 games to like, oh no, we're probably only favored in 12 of these, then it's just more of a toss-up season. Now I don't think that's going to happen. I think Michigan State is ahead of this, but we're playing the game here. I still think it comes back to Hogard. The two on-court things for me would be if he just doesn't trust Hogard as much as he did last year, is he sprinkling in Fears? If he does sprinkle in Fears, is Fears good? Number one. And number two, is AJ pissed? Does AJ being pissed shift this entire team's dynamic? Because in a weird way, like, even though Tyson's the best player and Jaden's this special talent too, like AJ's kind of the heart, like the soul of this team, in my opinion. And like Tyson and Jaden are more special playing off of like Michigan State becomes special when those two are playing off of him. Whereas if AJ wasn't here or on AJ bad days, it throws everything off. So I don't know. I still have some questions there, and adding like the new wild card of Jeremy Fears might be really good. Could kind of funk up the chemistry there. The big one for me that I think is more likely is you miss Joey Hauser's shooting in a huge way. And I like Xavier Booker. I hope he emerges. I don't think Xavier Booker should play the 4. That's sort of just where I'm at. And he might have to because Izzo might like be adamant that he wants to play the 3 centers still. But if you try to play Booker at the 4 next to those 3 centers, one, I'm really underwhelmed by that. And two, I just don't think that's Booker's game at all. You can put Cohen Carr at the 4, he can't shoot. If you play Carr at the 3, he can't shoot. And now, so your only shooting option in the front court, we're going down a list of names: Booker, Carr, Cooper, Sissoko, Kohler. Jackson might be able to shoot a little, but you don't want to play him that much. So the only guy for 2 front court positions for 80 minutes that can shoot is Malik Hall. And we saw it in person, man. That man was visibly terrified for the final month of last season. And I hope he's healthy. I hope he gets back to like prime Malik Hall, because that could be a really, really good player. But part of what made Michigan State special at times last year, in my opinion, was you had Akins and Tyson making everything, and you had the threat of Joey Hauser to splash 6 threes on you any day too. Totally different team if you got 2 front court spots that can't shoot.
Can I say one thing about the front court shooting?
Yeah.
Call it a hot take. Call what you want. Cohen Carr's jumper is not as bad as people think.
That's a hot take.
I think about the worst jumper in college basketball. Like, you have someone that comes off top of your head.
I'll compare him to a Michigan State player that played a similar position, similar archetype. Brandon Dawson.
See, I think Cohen Carr has a better jumper than Brandon Dawson.
Okay. Brandon would try to take like 1 to 2 elbow jumpers a game, and it rarely went well.
Brandon was too strong. he shot too. She was too muscular to shoot jumpers. Cohen Carr's got a little less hope to him.
See, I think Cohen is Brandon's jumper, but he thinks he can shoot, which could be really problematic to his minutes.
Yeah, I'm interested to see like that first like 10 games of him shooting jumpers.
At least Brandon was self-aware. Like I'm put
If
backs.
but if he can just a little bit, just put a little bit of doubt in his mind that someone should get semi of a hand up, it'll open up some things.
Well, I mean, if he makes 3 threes his first game of the Champions Classic, we're gonna have to do an emergency podcast. But let's just say I'm highly skeptical that that happens.
Okay, last thing. What do you think he shoots from three this season?
To be honest, I think there's a chance he doesn't shoot threes.
Doesn't shoot one at
That's
all.
where I'm at. I'm sure he'll shoot like 1 or 2, but I think I think there's a world where he makes like less than 5 threes on the season.
Okay, because I see, I'm living in a world where he's shooting 30%, and I'm really hanging on to something.
That's crazy. If he shoots 2 threes a game this year, which I think is an absurdly high number for a guy who's probably playing 15 minutes, if he shoots 2 threes a game, I think he shoots 17% from 3. Also, the more interesting number to me is free throw. What does Cohen Carr shoot from free throw? Because if it's 50%, I'm taking the under.
I think he'll shoot around 67% from the line.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's like Shaq level bad as a shooter. I really do. But he's Shaq level special at everything else. All right. Well, fun exercise. Of those 4, just to put a bow on this, of those 4, which one is most likely to crash and burn? And what's the primary reason? If after all the reasons we talked about, what's the likely one here and what's the reason it happens?
I'm going to say Kansas, even though Kansas is my number 1 team. I think that Kansas, I can think of the most reasons.
Yeah, I think that's my answer too. And the reason is it would just be multiple of those reasons. There's too many ways it could happen.
Yeah.
Feels like we might have missed this though. Like now that we're leaving this and we picked Bill Self to be the team that crashes, I don't feel good. Like we had Matt Painter and John Shire sitting there and we chose Self.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm always hating on Duke, and I want to switch it up a little bit.